Hi, this is Brett Ingram, award-winning entrepreneur and digital marketer. And today, I want to share with you the simple work-life balance hack for entrepreneurs with too much to do. It's ironic, isn't it? I mean, we live in this day and age of technology and innovation, AI and everything else. So you would think logically that we had so many more things getting done for us that we would actually be less busy and we'd have less to do. But it's quite the opposite. We're actually more busy. We have more things thrown at us all the time, and there's a tremendous number of things to do. Now, to be sure, if you want to chart it based on efficiency, we probably get a lot more done than people did in centuries or decades past. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't make us any less busy. And as things have gotten increasingly more competitive and everything else, it just becomes really, really difficult. You know, I know growing up as a kid, I had a lot of free time. I used to jump on my bike, go with my friends, and we would just ride around town for hours at a time, go play ball at the field, whatever. And my parents would say, you know, just be back by dinner. Now, kids have scheduled activities, they're oversubscribed, they have a tremendous amount of pressure, even being young, because everything has amped up in intensity. Everything is amped up in terms of how organized it all is, and you know what the standards are for success. I remember talking with a friend of mine who his son and my son played soccer together, and I remember having a discussion with him when they were little boys, and he was saying, you know, he grew up in somewhere in the suburbs in New York. And he said, you know, I played high school lacrosse. And I said, oh, you know, that's really great. I said, you know, things have really gotten so intense now and so competitive that, you know, it's important to, you know, the kids have to start young. And it's unfortunate. He said, oh, you know, I don't really, you know, I never did that. He said, you know, I didn't even pick up a lacrosse stick until high school. And, you know, then I made the freshman team and I played. Full disclosure, he's not a tremendous athlete. So the fact of the matter is, times have changed. Now, even lacrosse is a year-round sport, and it used to just be one season. Soccer, my sons play soccer, they play it year-round. And so all of the sports now, the level of intensity is amped up. I played youth basketball as a kid. The best two kids in my entire town of 50, 60,000 people were the two that played on the travel team with the best kids from the other towns in the area, and they played in a travel league. Now travel is like the lowest level. There's rec, travel, premier, AAU. There's 6 other levels of basketball. It goes all year round, and it's in every single league, and all the best players are playing in multiple leagues at once. And so it's just sort of the nature of the beast, right? I mean, that's where we are today. Life is so busy. And so as parents or as adults, we have so many things to do, so many draws in our time, and we're constantly bombarded by so much too. That's difficult in and of itself. But then when we talk about being an entrepreneur, a business owner, it's even harder because we now have to add that on top of our normal life and how busy that is. And so the effect is exponential. We go from just being busy and feeling overwhelmed like there's too much to do to being completely in the weeds and impossible to get everything done. And there's tons of things on our list that we just never can get to, even though we'd like to. It just feels like it's impossible to get it all done. You know, I know from my own experience, I can tell you that, you know, I obviously have my business. I have my podcast. I have a bunch of other things I have going on, but I also have kids and I have an active life. So I, you know, have to, you know, get the kids back and forth to school, shop for groceries, cook the food, make sure they have something healthy to eat, taxi them around to practices and everything else, in addition to all the normal life stuff, and in addition to running a business. And so it's an interrupt-driven schedule. I don't have, while I have freedom to do what I want, I also have things in my day that cause me to have breaks. I can't just work straight through from start to finish. And so, you know, that is sort of the nature of the beast, and it's what I signed up for because I wanted to be able to be present in my family and in my kids' lives. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't make it easy. And so to be able to do all that and juggle all that and still get everything done is not easy. And I had a lot of years where I worked really, really long hours, worked really, really late at night until I started to figure out how I could get things in balance. Because what was happening is I had this to-do list of all these things that I wanted to do, personal and professional, whatever. And what I found is a few things would get done and the rest of it just kept getting pushed. It got pushed to tomorrow, got pushed to the next day, got pushed to the next day. And then I would look up and I would see that this thing that's been on my list, I want to, clean out my top dresser drawer. It's been on my list for 3 months. For 3 months, and I just couldn't get to it. It was completely impossible to get to it. And then I have friends that I start to feel guilty because I haven't seen them in a while, or, have to, try to reconnect with family members and things like that. And it's really difficult to kind of do all that stuff. So I ended up feeling really out of balance, right? Getting pushed in every single direction and pulled in every single direction. And so it's a total out of balance because you focus on one thing and then you try to build that up and give it attention and then something else falls. And so then you run over there and you whack that mole and then, that now, okay, I went out with my friends so I feel better about that. And now this isn't working much anymore. So I whack that mole and you just keep running around, but you never feel sort of balanced or healthy or good, right? So over the years and over the struggles, I developed a different solution for the way that I do it. And it's not groundbreaking in the sense that I've seen and heard other people do it, but I can tell you from firsthand experience as somebody who went from a traditional to-do list to the way that I do it now, it's a relatively simple change, but the effect is dramatic. The impact of it is so different in terms of the way that it makes us feel whole and balanced again. So, one solution just right out of the gate before I get to that, obviously, is to automate, delegate, and outsource, right? So if there's stuff that we can do in our daily lives that we can automate with technology, awesome, right? Automatically go and do that, particularly business-related stuff. If there's things that we can delegate, if there's things that we can outsource, so if we have team members that we can give it to, or we can use outsourcing to, pay somebody else to do it, that's great too. Now, for me personally, for things in my personal life, I don't really like to do that. I don't want to pay somebody to taxi my kids around. I want to be there to do that. But there are things within business or other areas of our lives, and that's what we all have to decide. What areas of your lives would you be willing to automate, delegate, outsource? So that stuff, automatically, we're going to do that first. Boom. But let's just assume we've got that out of the way, and even still, we have too much to do. Because that's the situation I find myself in, and I think it's a situation a lot of people find themselves in, because it's sort of the nature of the beast as an entrepreneur. So I developed sort of a simple hack that absolutely fixes it and makes it so much better. So part of the issue is, and this is something that took me a while to realize, maybe I should have realized it sooner, is that when we schedule activities or a to-do list, that whole approach is flawed. Because basically what we're doing is we're putting a laundry list of all the stuff that we need to get done in one big long list. And the idea is, even if we break it into categories or whatever, or color code different things, it doesn't matter. The idea is the same. We have this list that we're just going to work through and try to get as many things done as we can, and then the stuff we don't get done gets pushed. Well, the problem with the traditional to-do list is there's always too much to do. So there are always too many items on the list. It's impossible to ever be able to get through them all in a given day, probably a week, maybe even a year for some of us, right? So what ends up happening, the reality of it is that the urgent and the immediate get the attention. So if there's something that's on our list that we know, if we don't make this sales call today, the deal expires and we're not going to, the Bob isn't going to take the contract or whatever. That's something we're going to do because we know we need to do it. If our kid needs to get picked up from school or needs to get to soccer practice, we're going to do it because they have to get there. So that's going to get prioritized. So all the things that are urgent, all the things that are immediate are always going to get that attention. And that's going to take up a good portion of the time. So then we have our other to-do list stuff that we can work through when we get a chance. And so what ends up happening is most of the stuff on the list gets pushed to the next day. Now it's funny because in the old days, I used to actually use a handwritten planner. And some people might still use that. There's value in it. I like handwriting things, but at the same time, it's not really that practical because what I found was I was spending more time organizing my planner than I was working through things because I kept moving things from one day to the next, one day to the next, one day to the next. And the more I dumped on my list, the better I felt because I had it down on a list, which means I don't need to have it taking mental clutter in my head. I don't need it to take up space there because I've got it down on this list. I won't forget to do it, right? It's a nice crutch. It feels really good. But the reality of it is we just keep moving things to the next day because they never get done. And then as I said, if we're tracking the date, it's scary to look up and see that 6 months later, we're still rewriting the same to-do list item that we meant to do 6 months ago. Now, some of those things, to be sure, are things we might want to get to, but they're not really that important. We don't really care. And maybe after 6 months, we just cross it off. I don't really care that much anymore about that. I'm not going to do that anymore. That's fine. But the reality of it is there will be things we do want to get done and wish we got done and we never get to. So instead of never getting to the important stuff because we're focusing on a to-do list where we go through the urgent and the important, instead what I like to do is start with what I call buckets. And this is a little technique that we actually use with our kids because the idea is, kids are equally busy nowadays too. And when they're young, they have very little control over their own schedules. But it's important for them to have balance in their lives. It's important for them to be able to do all the things that they need to do as well. We don't want them to be so focused on homework and grades that it's the only thing that they do. At the same time, if they spend too much time on video games or social lives or whatever else, then they aren't putting in enough effort to excel and succeed in the other areas of their lives. So it's important to sort of teach them young. And so we started this with our kids. And the way that we did it was we said, look, what are the areas of your life that matter to you? Okay? So if you think of your life as sort of a pie, right? And each of those wedges of the pie is an area of your life that's important to you. When all the pie is together, we feel balanced. When there's only a few pieces of pie and the other ones aren't there, we don't feel very balanced. So with buckets, if we think of it as sort of buckets that are filled with water, and maybe they're all on a pole, hanging by a pole, right? With a little teeter in the middle. And so basically, if we fill a bucket too full on this side, it's going to tip like this. If we fill a bucket too much on this side, it's going to tip like this. So the idea is to try to get all the buckets with enough water in them and enough stuff in them so that way it's even across and we feel balanced. It's a perfect sort of analogy for the way that our lives work. And so if we think about what those buckets are, and these can be different. There are some universal buckets, but there are individual ones for individual people. But one of them is the physical bucket. What do we want to do with our physical body in terms of whether it's exercise, whether it's fitness, whether it's, health and the way that we eat or whatever else, right? That's sort of like the physical bucket. Doing our doctor's appointments, taking care of our physical health. That is a super important bucket because if we don't have our health, then it's going to be very difficult to be successful in any other area of our lives. Now, unfortunately, for a lot of us, especially as adults, that's one of the areas that's first to go. We just I meant to go exercise, I meant to go run, I meant to go to the gym, I just don't have time, right? I would rather eat well, but I had to swing through the drive-thru because I'm busy and I just don't have time to cook. Totally understandable. I've been there, I've done that 100 times, but the fact is it's important that we put it more as a priority, so that can be one of our buckets. Emotional could be another bucket. There are things we need to do in our own minds, whether it's, meditation or mindfulness or whatever, affirmations, whatever it is that makes us feel good and stable about who we are, emotionally. There could be a social bucket, hanging out with friends, hanging out with family, whatever else, right? There's obviously a business bucket. So whatever we have in our business. Now, for me personally, my business bucket is multiple buckets because I have essentially multiple businesses. So I have, a bucket for my podcast and all that kind of stuff, but I also have a bucket for my core business, and I have a bucket for a new venture that I'm working on. And so basically, instead of lumping those all together and knowing that, this is such a big part, it actually needs more than one bucket, right? If I put them all in one bucket and then I balance it with the other buckets, I'm going to be spending very little time on business and I'm not going to be able to get enough done. So the idea is we want to spread this out over as many buckets as we need. You could have a spiritual bucket. So if there's a particular spirituality thing that matters to you or whatever else, a project bucket. So whatever kind of projects that we're doing, a life or a personal bucket, just things that you want to do for yourself, whether it's, read a book or learn how to, play cards or play pool or whatever, go on a hike, and some of these buckets, as you can see, will kind of overlap, right? If we take care of our physical health, and one of the things we want to do is exercise, it also usually boosts our emotional health as well. If we go running with friends, we might actually tick off a social bucket too. But the point is, we want to think about in our own personal experience, if we think about all of our buckets and we close our eyes, and those are the buckets we have listed, and thinking of all of those, thinking of being able to address all of those on a daily basis makes you feel balanced, then you have the right set of buckets. If when you think about having all those buckets filled, there's a hole somewhere, or you feel like something's missing, then there's a bucket that's not in there that should be. And so that's what we want to do. We want to determine what those buckets are. And we want to figure out what areas of our lives are most important and lay those all out in our mind. And then what we want to do, once we have that list of our buckets, then we can list our tasks and priorities. And we can do it like a normal to-do list or whatever, but we list them under each bucket. So now we, and again, any like manifestation of how you want to do this, I use an online management tool called Monday, where I create a board for each one. And so I have a board for each bucket, and then within those boards, I have all of my to-do lists. So now I know if I see all my boards, I know I've got to knock out some stuff on each of the boards, right? But you can do this with a handwritten list, color coding, whatever, that doesn't really matter. The point is, we lay out our tasks and priorities for each of those buckets like a normal to-do list within each bucket. But here is the key step, right? Now what we want to do is when we're scheduling our day for today or for tomorrow or whatever, and I recommend, by the way, scheduling tomorrow the night before. Because when we do that, we already start the day with a plan, and we're much more likely to be able to check off all of our boxes, fill all our buckets, and get to where we need to be. If we wait until the morning to start, and then there's a distraction and something else happens, and there's a problem, we may not ever get to a good schedule, and we may waste a lot of time. At any rate, what we do is we break the next day into time blocks to hit all the buckets. So this is where we do our prioritization, not by task itself, but by bucket. So what we can say is, listen, not all my buckets are equal. I don't need to spend equal time with friends every day that I need to work on my business. That's just me. For other people, it may be different. But the fact is, so what we're going to do there is we're going to say, I'm going to spend, if I know that I have an 8-hour day, I'm going to work 4 hours, then I have to go get my kids at school, whatever. I've got 2 hours in the afternoon, 2 hours at night. I'm going to spend 4 hours on, 2 hours on this business bucket, 1 hour on the podcast bucket, 1 hour on this bucket, and then I'm going to spend, an hour on the me, the physical and emotional bucket, or 30 minutes or whatever. So we break out our time. If we do this, we fit it into a structure that already we know can work. We already know that if we spend 4 hours on this, we can do that because we know we have 8 hours. Time is our ultimate constraint. So when we work backward from the amount of time that we have, and we break up our buckets accordingly to what is the priority for the given day, now what we can do is spend that much time on each bucket. So now if I have 4 hours to work on my business and I jump in and I look at it, I can look at the priorities and I can say, well, these are the ones I'm going to get done first. But it takes away all the pressure of needing to get through everything on the to-do list, because I already know I'm going to spend the amount of time that I need and the rest of the stuff is going to carry forward. But I also know that I'm going to have balance because I'm going to get to all the different things that I need to do this. And so by breaking our our schedule into time blocks based on a certain amount of time per bucket. And then we look at whatever tasks are in that bucket and choose which ones to do. We allow ourselves the freedom to be able to do the things that are the most important in each of the areas of our lives every single day. And that allows us to become balanced and feel balanced. But, and here's the key, while we're still moving all the balls up the field. Nothing is being dropped. Nothing needs to be whack-a-mole later because we're moving them all up the field. They may not be moving as quickly, right? If we put all 8 hours into our business today, we might really move the business a little bit more forward, but everything else is going to fall backward. So it may be a bit slower in terms of the way each of them moves, but the fact is we can tweak our daily schedule as needed. Look, if we have a big project due and there's a deadline, we might need to prioritize that bucket today. I might need to say, today, I'm just going to have to give up those other buckets and put it all in this one bucket. That happens. But if we do that consciously, instead of being driven by tasks, then what happens is we remember the next day, now I need to shift it back. Now I need to get it to a point where I'm filling all these other buckets so I can feel good. Okay, I can't go to the gym today. I have too much work to do and I have social engagement as well. That's fine. Tomorrow, no social engagement. I'm going to go to the gym. So that's the way that we can do it. And this way, we're able to fill our schedule, feel balanced, get all the things that we need done. Now, the alternative is an endless game of whack-a-mole. If we don't do this, we end up in that endless game of whack-a-mole or leak plugging. You know, we've got the dam and it springs a leak. So we run over there and we put our finger in there and it springs another leak. We put our finger in over there. And before you know it, you can't plug all the leaks. And even though you're trying to get as much done, you don't feel good about yourself because you're not in balance. The other thing is, the other benefit from this approach is that we learn to value time as our scarcest resource. It really brings it to the forefront because that is what we're managing. We're not managing our to-do list, we're managing our time that we're spending in each area of our life. So it makes us, by definition, prioritize the stuff that's most important. And by doing that, we're making choices and prioritizing what matters most to us. That is a super valuable skill and habit to develop because it will serve us for the rest of our lives and make sure that we get the most important things in our lives done. So the takeaway here is that as entrepreneurs and business owners, we are possibility people. We dream of all we can do, and it can be hard to stuff all our dreams in their full form into our schedules. We like to be busy, and that's good, but we also need to maintain a balance in our lives and make sure that we give time and attention to every aspect of our life that's important to us. By shifting our focus from tasks to time and including all of our buckets in our schedule, we could build both the business and the life of our dreams. And that's what it's all about.